WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Happy New Year, happy opening day to everyone celebrating Oriole baseball back, but Blue Jays baseball is back, and this guy is one of our defending champions here. He wrote a book on the Blue Jays last year called Big 50 and the 50 Greatest Moments in Blue Jays History. I was there for the greatest moment in Blue Jays history when Joe Carter was running around the place, and if you couldn't find free beer on Yonge Street in Toronto that night, well, you should have been there. It was kind of fun. Shai Davidi covers all things Blue Jays for Sportsnet up in Canada. He is here in Baltimore covering all things Blue Jays and Orioles as we kick off the season. Shai, what's going on, man? Good to have you back aboard. Good to have baseball back, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's always an exciting time of the year, and long spring training. Start of the season's long overdue, so it's nice that it's finally here.
Even longer if you had to go to Korea or whatever. And I guess for a lot of these players, and certainly you have Stroman on your side that was one of the big stars, Adam Jones on our side, I think it really it benefits some of these guys maybe more than all the hand-wringing and the angst to get them ready to play baseball. Adam Jones, all the guys on the American team for sure, even the Dominican team, the Puerto Rican team, those guys went long into this. There's a little bit more seasoning, and no one got hurt, which is good, right?
For sure. Look, I've been a fan of the World Baseball Classic since its inception. I've covered every one of them, and it's tremendous theater. And anyone who'd rather watch a grapefruit or cactus league game instead of that, I'm not sure you're not doing baseball right at that point. But teams do a lot of holding their breath and crossing their fingers with their players. But the fact is the players have to get ramped up early to have success, and we saw the American team obviously go the distance for the first time, and we wonder if that's really going to make a difference. Marcus Stroman in particular really stepped up in a big way, was determined to dominate the tournament and did. And now the Blue Jays are certainly going to be hoping there's a carryover for him into the regular season.
Where is your optimism on the Blue Jays? The one thing that I've talked to so many people about here as the season starts is I'm not bullish on the Orioles this year. I mean, I have been in the past. I don't think they had a very good offseason. I didn't love the way the season ended for them last year, and I know you're very familiar with the Zach Britton situation up at Skydome and Rogers Center at the end of last year. Last time we saw Buck Showalter and Zach Britton. But, as far as augmenting the team in the offseason, everyone would like to believe they're a better team on opening day than they were last year when the season ended. I think both of these teams would be very hard-pressed to say that they're better in April than they were in October.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Blue Jays, they're different, and they're a little bit deeper. Losing Edwin Encarnacion hurts, and that's the type of big blow piece in the middle of your lineup that's very, very difficult to replace. But the Blue Jays reallocated that money to Kendrys Morales and Steve Pearce and Joe Smith and J.P. Howell. They were able to re-sign Jose Bautista. Collectively, they may be just as good, maybe a little bit better. From a rotation perspective, I mean, the Blue Jays had the best ERA in the American League last year from the starting staff, and they're in position to replicate that because this year you've got a full year of Francisco Liriano rather than R.A. Dickey. There's still some upside in Aaron Sanchez and Marcus Stroman and, J-Hap and Marco Estrada. I mean, last year may have been peak years for them, but they're certainly in position to stay in a similar kind of level, if not fall off. So, I mean, the Blue Jays should be a contender for a postseason spot. Right now, I would think the Boston Red Sox are probably the best team in the division. That being said, I mean, they've got some pretty big concerns with Drew Pomeranz and David Price, Steve Wright. I mean, if Tyler Thornburg, that rotation and that pitching staff may not play out as we expect it to. Pablo Sandoval's a big question mark at third base, Mitch Moreland at first base. They haven't really sufficiently replaced David Ortiz. So there are a number of concerns for the Red Sox that could open up the division. And the Blue Jays are probably the second best team in the division on paper, with a chance to really make a difference if opportunity arises.
Look, no one in Canada or the United States is unfamiliar with players moving around and changing laundry, as Seinfeld would say. The Encarnacion thing is a little curious to me. I feel like the Blue Jays Jays have been this blossoming franchise. They've been printing money throughout Canada. And Mark Shapiro, Baltimore guy, running the franchise up there. I know he was up there for some sort of overhaul. But the notion that Encarnacion and Bautista were both going to leave, that they both were going to get $100 million plus contracts, we've been talking about that for 3 or 4 years in the same way that everyone here is talking about Machado. And I'm sure Josh Donaldson is also on the lips of everyone up in Toronto. But now that Encarnacion is gone, is there some remorse there from the fan base at least to say, what are you doing letting that guy go? How are we going to replace those RBIs? And by the way, y'all had the money to sign him, so don't poor mouth me,
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that remains odd and troubling to some parts of the fan base about the Encarnacion situation is that the Blue Jays ended up the high bidder, and they didn't by a wide margin, and they still didn't get the player. Now that's the way the process played out was unusual for a lot of free agents, and not just Encarnacion. But certainly, his camp thought that he was going to get well north of 80 over 4 that the Blue Jays offered at him, and by the time all was said and done, he was settling for 3 at 60 from the Cleveland Indians. So it was a very unusual offseason. That being said, my sense is that a lot of fans have made peace with it, but they're not going to know until the season gets going. And Kendrys Morales was the primary piece brought in to replace Encarnacion. There's going to be a lot of eyes on him, and if he has a good year, and he's a switch hitter, so he brings a presence in the middle of a right-handed heavy lineup that was needed in that regard. I mean, if he has a good year, he's going to make people forget about Encarnacion. And if he doesn't, and Encarnacion crushes for Cleveland, then people are going to pine for him. That's just the way it is.
Well, both of these teams are going to do two things, right? They're going to hit home runs, and they're both going to strike out, right?
Yeah, that's the way they're set up. Although the Blue Jays have been making an effort to try and do some different things with 2 strikes this year, but the one thing that's worth keeping in mind is that strikeouts have risen a significant amount across the game over in each of the past 5 seasons, and so if a team is striking out more, it's not necessarily a sign that that they're having less success. I mean, this is just the way the game is going, because you're getting a lot of mid-90s stuff coming out of the bullpen, and it's not just one guy, the closer at the end of the game. It's the guys in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th inning who are throwing mid-90s with cut and sink that hitters have to deal with, and this is something different. There used to be a time where a team would say, we've got to get into the bullpen. And now it's like, hey, we got to find a way to just bleed the starter well enough that he stays in the game, but we still get our damage in. So the game is changed in that way. So I'm not as concerned about the strikeouts the way some people get fixated on. It's just part of a trend in the game, and it's cyclical. And maybe that's it's just going to be a period of time where the hitters are going to catch up to the pitchers, and the game will change again.
I don't think there's any way you can look at the Orioles and feel great about their pitching, but I look at the Blue Jays, and if I were a Blue Jays fan, the pitching that they have every day, someone's going to take the ball who's very representative, and and I still see Stroman as a guy, and especially having watched him pitch in the World Baseball Classic, he's a guy who's going to have a better year this year, I think, than he had last year. I don't know that J Happ could be better. I don't know that Sanchez could be better. I mean, even Estrada was pretty straight on. I mean, wins and losses aside, took the ball 30 times and gave him a chance to win every 5th day. The Blue Jays have that maybe more so than a lot of franchises around baseball.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think you can make the case they have one of the top 5, maybe even top 3 starting staffs in all of baseball. I mean, they do have some question marks in the bullpen, and especially with Roberto Osuna opening the season on the disabled list, he hadn't looked right since he came back from the World Baseball Classic after getting hit hard for Mexico. So there's some concerns about what's going to happen at closer right now out of the gate. And the Blue Jays have struggled in the bullpen the past couple of seasons, at least in the beginning of the year, before they figured it out. So that's an opportunity to piss away games that can ultimately end up hurting you. But the starting staff is going to keep them right there. There's no reason to think there'll be any step back. And yeah, Marcus Stroman certainly has a lot of upside left in him, and if he takes a step forward, That's a major difference. A lot of people do think that Aaron Sanchez still has some upside left as well. That last year was really just him, starting to scratch the surface of all he can be. Marco Estrada pitched most of last year with a bad back. So he's healthy right now. He's not having any of the back issues, and if he can get through a season without issues in his back, there's a chance that he's better as well. So the starting rotation is going to be a strength. They have the chance to have a very good bullpen, but there are some questions in there right now.
Longtime baseball columnist and Toronto historian Shai Davidi joining us here. He is with Sportsnet as their baseball columnist. You can follow him out on Twitter at Shai Davidi. That's SHIDAVIDI. He's also inked the book, The Men and the Moments and the History of the Toronto Blue Jays. The Big 50 is the book. You can Google that and find it as well at sportsnet.ca, as well as at Shai Davidi on Twitter. You did WBC, man. Give me a little insight into that. We certainly were up late watching a lot of the games here. Obviously, Adam Jones and Manny Machado and Jonathan Scope. We had a lot of guys involved in it. It was an exciting tournament from the inside out. A lot of folks thought it wasn't going to work. It is at heart kind of an exhibition, but I think that the fans can only take it as seriously as the players do. And obviously, from the Latin side and even from the American guys that play, there's a lot of spirit going on with that tournament, right?
For sure. And the issue, I think, is twofold. One, that I think in the United States, there isn't that same culture of international baseball or passion for international baseball as you get in some of the other countries. And that's why the engagement is different. I think in Canada, and the Canadian team was my focus point at the WBC. The Canadian sports fan grows up with a passion for international play because of the National Canadian Hockey Team, and there's a lot of pride in that. And every time there's an event involving a hockey team, it's a big deal. And I think that transfers over to the other sports. And people have been really excited about the WBC. Now, a little bit less so this year because the Canadian team was missing a lot of players, wasn't very good, and there was a lot of disappointment that they went 0-3 on their way out. But the second element is that there's a lot of resistance to the WBC within the coaching staffs and front offices all across the game because they'd rather not have their players outside of camp. At the ownership level, there's support for it because it makes money. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of fingers crossed. About watching their players competing for other coaching staffs. So those are the two things that in some ways are holding it back. But if you watched any of the games, and there were tremendous games, the group that was in Mexico, there were tremendous games, Italy and Mexico, Italy, Venezuela, Mexico. There are a lot of excitement in Asian groups, and here in North America too. There was just some tremendous baseball, some tremendous theater. And if you're a fan, there was a lot of reason to want to watch those games because it's played a little bit differently than the Major League game. There was a lot of passion on display from the players, and there was a lot of fun to watch for spring training.
Shai, I've been doing this a long time, man. 32 years in media, 25 years on the radio. Camden Yards, we're going to be celebrating this week 25 years since it opened, and Rick Sutcliffe beat the Indians, and I was there for that. Baseball over the quarter of a century here, probably because of the creep that owns the team here, has really sort of lagged. And, kids aren't playing the game. A lot of kids play lacrosse here, and I know that that's also, a big part of, Canadian and box lacrosse and all of that. A lot of the best lacrosse players in the world have come from Canada. But you've written a story here recently about kids in Canada playing baseball. And I go back. Look, I was there the night Joe Carter hit the home run in Toronto. And as I said, I've never seen a city more crazy. And I've seen 2 championships here in Baltimore with the football team. But nationally, and the national pride in the Blue Jays. And I had Griff on earlier this week talking about the Expos. I mean, Toronto, the Blue Jays are Canada's team. And I think these last 2 years, the last 24 months, Canada has become, enlightened and alive with baseball again, the whole country, and kids are playing the game north of the border, right?
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting, that story that you mentioned. It really looks at how in a lot of centers, registrations opened for amateur baseball in Ontario and a lot of places, and in some of the other provinces, it's just starting to open up or just about to open up, and there just aren't enough fields to meet the supply, to meet the demand. Of
Literally
kids
the fields. It's not managers, coaches.
Well, I mean those are elements too. You know, there is a shortage of volunteers. That if the various associations were to expand, they would need to expand their volunteer network. But the primary issue is that there's no more space, and that a lot of the associations, like one of the biggest ones is in the country, is North Toronto. And they don't have a sole dedicated home field for their elite rep teams to play at. So they're moving around to different fields, and the practices are at different places all the time because especially once the kids start getting older to the 90-foot base path fields, there's just a shortage of them in the city. So baseball participation did dip in Canada in the early 2000s, around the turn of the century. Soccer was booming at that point. A lot of fields were lost to soccer in Toronto. A lot of fields in general have just been going towards condominium building. The city is booming. There's absolutely no space anywhere in the city. So you've got a confluence of issues, and it's meant that a lot of kids who want to play baseball are already frozen out if they haven't signed up already.
What do you expect for the Blue Jays this year? I got my prediction in with the Orioles at 78. I'm taking some raspberries on that. I'm kind of used to it. I really dislike the Orioles offseason. I haven't been in love with the Blue Jays offseasons. But as I look at them as they match up, I don't see any reason why the Blue Jays couldn't win 90 games this year given their pitching.
Yeah, I think they're going to be right around that range, and I would think that they're going to be at minimum in the hunt for a wild card, if not a wild card winner. And if the Red Sox happen to flounder, I think the Blue Jays will be the team that knocks them off. The division is going to be super interesting because the Yankees are really hard to read on what they're going to be. If their kids come quick, then they could be a factor. But then again, there are a lot of question marks in their pitching staff and in their lineup, for that matter. The Tampa Bay Rays, another team which you never know how they're going to break, and they could be really good with a pretty deep rotation, or they could disappear and have that stretch, the kind of stretch they did in May, June last year, where they lost, almost every game they played and really eliminated them from being a factor. So, I think the Blue Jays are going to be okay. The Orioles, I'm reluctant to ever write them off because you think they're not going to have a great season, and then they're there at the end because they've got a bunch of great players who are able to keep them afloat. But I do think the Red Sox and the Blue Jays are a notch above everyone else in the division right now.
Shai, always great having you on, man. You're a wealth of Toronto knowledge, and I'll be reaching to you if my Capitals wind up coming up there at the ACC and taking on the Leafs for some fine Canadian brew pub recommendations or whatnot. But I'm hoping to get up to TO before this is all over. I can't imagine anything crazier than a playoff hockey game in Toronto against Alex Ovechkin. That would be pretty delicious, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and the Raptors are fighting the Wizards for third place in the Eastern Conference in the NBA standings right now, and it's a lot of fun in the city with the Leafs looking like they're going to make the playoffs, the Raptors looking to make another run in the NBA postseason, and the Jays getting ready to try and make another run at the playoffs. So it's certainly a fun time, and it's a lot better than what Toronto's experienced in recent years, where it was pretty dry for all the teams for a long time.
Hey, listen, you've got Geddy Lee. What more do you want? All right, once you have that, you don't need anything else. Right?
That's right. Geddy Lee and Drake, we've got holding it down.
Shai, take care of yourself. Enjoy your time here in Baltimore. Don't eat any tourist crab cakes, okay?
All right. Thanks a lot.
You got it. Shai Davidi covering all things baseball and the Blue Jays. The book is Big 50, the Toronto Blue Jays, the men and the moments who've made the Blue Jays. He's also at Sportsnet as their longtime baseball columnist. You can follow him at Shai Davidi. That's SHIDAVIDI and Sportsnet.ca. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device as we get this baseball season started. Luke's going to be at the ballpark. You can find him, of course, Baltimore Luke on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And if you miss anything at all, you can find it in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in, even in Canada, anywhere the internet is served. Probably not North Korea, but anywhere else you can grab us. China also might shut us down because, I don't play big over in Beijing at this point. Morning newspaper reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. If there's any comings and goings with the Orioles, roster moves, breaking news, you get that first on the WNST text service. That is our best service. It's spam-free and always brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home, getting you ready for the weekend. Baseball, hockey, basketball, Liars Luncheon, draft coming up in a couple of weeks, the Masters. We got you covered around here. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.